It was the highest death toll of Jews since the Holocaust itself. In the Holocaust, the Nazis actually tried to conceal the degree of their torture and violence, not only from their own German people, many of whom still had humanity in their blood and Christianity in their hearts. And even if they didn't particularly like Jews, they would have found the mass murder and torture of Jews repugnant. Hitler hid his crimes from his own people and, of course, from the world. By the way, he did so with the assistance of the Red Cross back then. But not the Palestinian Nazis. They bragged about it. They cheered about it in real time. They live streamed their butchery. They phoned back to Gaza to tell their friends and family that they had killed Jews, raped Jews, tortured Jews. They were exultant. But of course, the kidnapping was especially valuable for several reasons, because they were human shields. Now, Hamas uses Palestinians as human shields. Almost every school or hospital in Gaza sits on top of a Hamas base. Hamas wins either way that way. Either the Israelis don't attack them because they don't want to hurt civilians, or the Israelis do attack them, and Hamas wins a PR victory against Israel. The war crime legally is on the terrorists, of course, but tell that to the CBC or the BBC or TikTok's propaganda mill. Gazan civilians are effective as hostages, as human shields, but Israeli hostages, well, that's something altogether different. Israel would be extra sensitive about accidentally killing them. And of course, they are the bargaining chip that Hamas uses for anything and everything, getting a ceasefire, releasing Hamas terrorists from Israeli prisons, whatever. Hamas worships death. Israel cherishes life. That's what the phrase l'chaim means, to life. It's the opposite for Hamas, a veritable death cult. There were many awful images of that day, but amongst the worst was this one of a horrified mother and her two little babies being stolen. They were infants. It was horrific. That is what every Palestinian protester the past 16 months has been cheering for. Well, yesterday Hamas released that mother and those two babies and another aged man, released them dead. They were murdered by Hamas, and Hamas bargained with their corpses to get back from Israel more terrorists who are in prison. Hamas tortured and killed the beautiful young family. They tortured and killed the babies. And then when they gave them back, they turned it into a festival, a public day of celebration. Watch these various clips. It was a festival, upbeat music, a formal, official celebration, a happy day. They invited children en masse, and everyone put on their uniforms and masks and guns. These terrorists who normally hide in civilian clothes, they were bravely wearing their uniforms and bore their weapons openly, knowing that Israel wouldn't attack them then. The caskets, by the way, were locked. They had to be drilled open. They had to be searched for explosives first. The Red Cross was there to assist with the handover, the Red Cross that has not a single word to say about these hostages, that has not even tried to visit them or help them or bring them food or medical care in the last year and a half. What a spectacular production it was, an expensive media-savvy production, paid for by the NGOs, including UNRWA. That's a UN agency that Trudeau has given tens of millions of our taxpayers' dollars to. I saw a poignant tweet that said, even in Nazi Germany, there were righteous Gentiles who hid Jews from the Nazis, who protected Jews. Not so in Gaza, not one. Some Israeli hostages were kept in underground tunnels, again, built by Western aid money, but many others were kept in civilian homes. There really is no meaningful distinction between Gazans and Hamas. Hamas has seen to that. 20 years of propaganda and indoctrination, 20 years of brainwashing their youth. It would be like if Hitler had survived and lived and continued on. What would German youth have been like in the 1950s and 1960s if Hitler had continued on with his Nazi regime, including with modern technology of indoctrination? Imagine Germany with 20 years of that. That's Gaza today. Oh, by the way, the only starving people were the hostages, not the Gazans. So much for a famine, as the propagandist said. Trump was sickened by the images. He said he would support literally anything Israel does in response.
As far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out. I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out.
It'll be interesting to see what Israel does do, but it will be uninteresting to see the world's response to it. It'll be exactly what we've seen these past 16 months. No interest in the mainstream media about the new Nazis and what they've just done, but exquisite interest in what Israel does in return. Every one of these terrorists who takes off their uniforms and then calls themselves a civilian again. Oh, and there's some Canadian news. Did you see this? It's a story in the Toronto Star. Gazan families sue Canada for visa application delays. The families represent 53 people who have applied for visas under a special temporary resident program for Palestinians with family in Gaza. Let me read a little bit. 11 families from Gaza are taking the Canadian government to court for prolonging their, quote, exposure to life-threatening and inhumane conditions, unquote, by delaying application processing under a program meant to offer relief from the Israel-Hamas conflict. The families represent 53 people, including 27 babies and children, who have applied for visas under the Temporary Resident Pathway for Palestinian Extended Family in Gaza program, launched in January 2024. Yeah, no. We have to send them all back. Not just the Gazans who we are insanely taking, but so many who we have already taken and who would murder our Canadian babies too if they ever get the chance. And I'm afraid if we continue on this path, they just might get the chance.